honor for me to be here. Thank you, Jeffrey, and thanks to Rabbi Azankot for inviting me to Bet Torah. I want to dedicate this lecture to the memory of two people for whom I dedicated this book, Dr. Albert Mugravi and Mr. Jack LaVoz, your dad. So with your permission, I dedicate this lecture to their memory. My interest for Sephardic rabbis, I would say, was initiated in 1982. That year I was studying in the yeshiva of Rabbi Kassin, Midrash Sephardi, for my semicha, for my rabbinical title. And I was also studying in Hebrew University, Jewish history and philosophy. And I used to go a lot to the National Jewish Library, Sifrei Leumit. I love libraries, and I love spending time in libraries, writing and reading. But I have a small problem, it's an ADD thing, that my capacity of focusing is like 50 minutes. Then I need to take 10 minutes off. For every hour, 10 minutes off. All right? Now, what do I do in those 10 minutes? I usually go just around the library, gathering books, any books, 5, 6 books for every hour. I read these books and I just see what this book is about, and if it's something very interesting, I put it aside. But that habit, I don't know how it began, but that habit had expanded my horizons so much, because during many hours of reading library, I had in my hands, let's say, thousands of books. Now, in one of those journeys, when I was in the Sifrei Leumit, I got to one book unexpectedly that changed, I would say, my life, my intellectual life, at least, forever. I have a copy of it. It was in the archives in the National Library. In those days, in college, I was studying Arabic. Better said, Judeo-Arabic, okay? With Professor Yoshua Blau, the expert in Judeo-Arabic, because I wanted to have direct access to the books of Rambam, especially to Moreh Nevuchim. Because Moreh Nevuchim is a book that, you have in the academy people writing things that completely opposite, on one same book, and I wanted to have direct access to that book. Then I discovered this book, by chance. It's called Biblioteca Española Portuguesa Judaica, which is a catalog of books. And I remember I opened this, and the first name I saw was Rabbi Moshe de Ishaq Diaz, a very Spanish name. And I see that he writes about meditations on the history on the sacred history of Genesis. Meditations of Genesis in Spanish by a rabbi that sounds like very Spanish to me. And then I go page after page, and I found that there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of rabbis and books written in Spanish that were completely unknown to me. Completely unknown. I never heard about these rabbis. And guess what? I started to find out, where can I get these books? Oh, these books belong to the library Etz Achaim from Amsterdam. These books were written between the year 1600, almost literally, until more or less 1750, which is when the Sephardic Jews in Amsterdam stopped speaking and writing in Spanish, and they adopted the Deutsch language. Now, during these 150 years, hundreds or thousands of books were written in Spanish, and nobody knew about that. I was so surprised. Then I said, where can I get these books? And then I got a very big surprise too. Here in the Sifrei Leumit, because the Sifrei Leumit of Jerusalem had recovered these books from Holland, from Amsterdam. They are all here. So it was very difficult to access to these books. They were in a special R reserved section. You could take one book at a time, and Chas v'Shalom, you can damage these books. It's terrible. Now, I couldn't photocopy them. They wouldn't allow you to make photocopies of the book. Only microfilm, but it was too expensive for me. I couldn't afford to make microfilm. So I had only one choice, to sit down, read the books, and copy them. And this is what I did. And I started to copy these books. I can mention to you books like Rabbi Cardoso, De Excelencias y Calumnias de los Hebreos, like the excellences and calumnies of the Jews, or the prejudice that the Goyim have against the Jews and how we respond to them, and all the qualities of the Jews and how he describes them. Okay? Abraham Herrera, Sha'ar HaShamayim, a Sefer on Kabbalah in Spanish. Now, the thing is that the more I got into these books, the more I was fascinated with them. Most of them were written for Jews that escaped from Portugal and from Spain with a very heavy Catholic background, and now they were searching, Judaism, the roots, the Jewish roots. But you have to teach Judaism to people who were educated in convents, you understand? And those books cater to them, to their mentality. And having been raised in a Catholic country, Argentina, I thought, wow, this is such an amazing book because it talks the language that we need today. Not in 16th or 17th century, but today, all right? And then this is what started my fascination with Sephardic rabbis. Why? Because I said, it's incredible that nobody knows about these books. Hundreds or thousands of books, many of them manuscripts, okay, that never saw the light of never were published, and nobody knows about them. And they're so important. So these two things together are really what bothered me. It's such an important legacy, and very few people know about them. Now, you can blame the language barrier. You say, okay, this is because they were in Spanish. I know. But with time, I saw that this is not something that happened to Sephardic rabbis that wrote in Spanish. Unfortunately, it's something that happened with most Sephardic rabbis. For some reasons, they are not very known. They are not very known. And I think that it's our fault and our duty to resurrect them, as Jeffrey said before. But this is how my fascination with Sephardic rabbis began. All right? Now, today is a completely different story. First of all, because unlike 1982, we have now almost complete access to the books of these rabbis. Why? Thanks to a website, a project called HebrewBooks.org. This website, HebrewBooks.org, has more than 50,000 books that were never republished in modern times that you can find there. You can find them online and just print them, and you have complete access to them. This didn't exist 20, 30 years ago. But today, they are there. You just need to know what you are looking for. But we have the tools. We have the contents there. Now, this sentiment that something unfair happened with Sephardic rabbis is what drove me to write my book. Right? I have been writing about Sephardic rabbis in my halacha of the day, a daily email that I sent since 6 years ago. And I have seen that whenever I write about Sephardic rabbis, I have much more readers. Like, there is an interest to know about their lives, about their ideas. So this is what I did. I started with a period of time that more or less covers between 1400 to 1600. This is exactly around one of the most traumatic times ever in Jewish history, and particularly in Sephardic history. The most traumatic event in Sephardic history, the expulsion from Spain, 1492. All right? So I wrote about rabbis who lived before the expulsion and rabbis who lived after the expulsion. All right? So I'm going to give you some examples of these rabbis and why it's so important for us today to resurrect their memories. Because it's not just a duty toward their memories. It's also something that is good for us, very good for us, for our identity, for our Sephardic identity, as Jeffrey said. Let me give you a couple of examples. I saw that you wrote in the presentation about 3 rabbis, right? You wrote about Rabbi Yitzhak Campanton. You also have chosen Rabbi Abraham Saba, and you chose Rabbi Tam Ibn Yehya, right? So I think I could, describe a little bit what is so important about this rabbi. So let me start with Rabbi Yitzhak Campanton. Again, we're talking about Spain, and Rabbi Yitzhak Campanton lived a long life. He was born in 1360 and he passed away in 1463, 103 years, which was nothing really common, especially in those days. He was born in Zamora, the Castilla, Spain, and died in Peñafiel, also Spain. All right. Now, he was called the Gaon of Castilla, a very prestigious name. He had many, many very prestigious Talmidim. For example, one of them was Rabbi Yitzhak de Leon, which is the rabbi that wrote a commentary of Sefer HaMitzvot called Megillat Esther. I don't know if you are familiar with the Sefer HaMitzvot of Rambam. Sefer HaMitzvot of Rambam is the book where Rambam writes all the mitzvot of the Torah, one by one. And usually Ramban Nachmanides brings some refutations and some objections to Rambam's counting of the mitzvot. Now, Megillat Esther is the one that comes and brings back the explanation from the point of view of a Rambam. So it's a very important book. So this is one of his Talmidim. Rabbi Yitzhak Aboab, the second, was another of his Talmidim. Rabbi Shem Tov, Ibn Shem Tov, etc. He founded a yeshiva in the city of Zamora in Spain. All right? Now, he wrote a very small but incredibly important book. This book is called Darchei HaTalmud. What does it mean, Darchei HaTalmud? The ways of the Talmud, the ways of the Gemara. All right? Now, you know that the Gemara is the most studied book, right? If you go to any yeshiva, what do they study in the yeshiva? Gemara, Gemara, and Gemara. Right? They spend the whole time studying Gemara. So the Gemara is the Yama Talmud, is the sea of the Talmud. Right? It's such an important book. Now, did you know that there is a Sephardic way to study Gemara? And where can we find this Sephardic way? Well, I have news for you. In a very short and small but very meaningful book called Darchei HaTalmud by Rabbi Yitzhak Campanton. This is a book about methodology. it teaches you, the student and the teacher, how to study and how to teach Gemara. Isn't that important today? You know that today almost no yeshiva in the world follows the Sephardic way of studying Gemara? Did you know that? Isn't it important to recover that? Now we have access to these books. It's just up to us to resurrect these memories, study these, which is very simple, and apply it. So I'm going to give you a few examples. Example number one. It says, the first thing you have to do when you study Gemara, you have to have a very important appreciation of the text. I know it sounds obvious, but it's not. Because many times, more than what we would like to think, when the Gemara is studied, the text becomes like a pretext for the commentaries. The students spend more time in the commentaries than in the text. The text is just obvious, but it's not. So he says, first of all, you have to analyze the text. And you need to know the following. It says that the text of the Talmud, the text of the Gemara, it was edited. It's not a text where the information was just, put there, one text after the other. Was edited meticulously by Rabbinan Rabbi. Rabbi also lived a long life, was the Rosh Yeshiva when he was 13 years old, in the time of the Amoraim we are talking about. And he spent all his life formulating and editing the Gemara. Right? So he says, you have to be very careful when you study the Gemara to see the structure of the Sugya. First of all, you have to identify the Sugya. Okay? When you identify the Sugya, you have to see the structure of it. The structure is called Surata Deshma'ata. Okay? That's the first thing that you have to pay attention to. All right? Let me just read something that I wrote here. For example, ideally an advanced student will also be able to read between the lines and understand the agenda of the editors of the Sugya. When you see the Surata Deshma'ata, peeling off the various layers and understanding the legal point the Sugya is trying to make. Okay? The order of citations within the Sugya is never accidental, and the questions and answers are deliberate. When well understood, the structure is clear and shows a sophisticated hand weaving a complex tapestry. You know how you say tractate of a Talmud in Aramaic or in Hebrew? Masechet. What is a Masechet? Masechet is like a tapestry, what you do for, where things are weaving one into the other. You have to see the structure. All right? Second, because the Gemara was hyper-edited by geniuses, you have to pay close attention, that's the second point, to the terminology of the Gemara. Do you think that Tanur Rabbanan, Taneh, Tanya are the same thing? No. Every one of these words is a key word for something. Ignoring the terminology, as unfortunately is done in most cases, doesn't allow you to appreciate the text. All right? Third, who are the protagonists? You need to know not just the names, but if they are from Eretz Israel, they are from Babel. It's important. The Gemara assumes that you know where they come from, and there is meaning in the fact that knowing the characters of the protagonist. For example, you have to know who is the teacher, who is the student. The Gemara assumes that you know this. All right? Fourth, commentaries. Go to the commentaries after you have exhausted the reading. After you have asked by yourself all the questions. Don't go to the commentaries immediately after you read the text. You have to analyze the text and read it once and again and again. All right, rereading and anticipation, etc. I don't want to read the whole thing, but there is a way in which Sephardim study Gemara. So is it important to revive this, to resurrect this? Isn't it part of our identity? Right? Now it's there. Go to Hebrew books, Darchei Talmud, and you have it. Oh, I have another idea, a better idea. Please tell Jeffrey after this that, maybe a community wants to sponsor, I don't have the time to do it, but sponsor a Talmid Chacham that will republish this book, Darchei Talmud. Very simple book, but very powerful. This is Rabbi Yitzhak Panton. It's not just something that belongs to the past. It belongs to the past, but it's our past. And somehow we have lost connection with this type of studying or this type of methodology. It is time to recover that. So this is one example. Let me go to something different, completely different. For me to write this book was also a very emotional task, because unfortunately many of the stories of the rabbis here are very sad stories, are really, really sad stories, especially the stories that have to do with the rabbis that lived and experienced the horror of the expulsion from Spain. Because I don't know if you can grasp what the expulsion meant. It's not like, oh, you are expelled from America. Okay, you're expelled from America today, you can go anywhere you want. But then, expulsion in many aspects, it almost meant a death sentence. Because you would leave with nothing. You were not allowed to take your money. Nothing. You would have to leave everything there. Okay? In Spain. And let's imagine you want to go to Turkey or to Italy. How would you go to Turkey or to Italy? You tell me. By what? By a boat. Now just imagine this. Just imagine this. You go with a boat. Maybe you were able to smuggle one gold coin, whatever. Now you pay to the captain. Now pay attention. You pay your fare for you, for your wife, and for your 3 children, or for 4 children. Now you got into the boat. What are the chances that the captain will take you to your destination? You understand my question?
It's in the zero.
What are the chances that he will take you there? Why in the world he would take you there? I mean, he will take your money. But once you are there, he might throw you to the sea, or better, he might sell you as a slave, and make money. Is anybody going to protect you? Anyone can protect you from this? Any police? Any international forces? Do you have any idea? We don't have the records. How many people die trying to escape Spain in boats? How many people were sold? How many Jews were sold as slaves in these circumstances? I didn't knew that. The Spaniards didn't knew that. They didn't care. Just talking about numbers. How many Jews were expelled from Spain? How many? Well, there are so many different views. I wrote here, but it seems like, there are different opinions. Some Chachamim, they said that they were 40 40,000 Jewish families in Castilla and Aragon. Okay? The Spanish historian Andrés Bernaldez also, 41 Jewish families in Castilla. According to Rabbi Don Isaac Abarbanel, 300,000 Jews left Spain. According to Rabbi Manuel Abohab, 420,000 Jews left Spain. Rabbi David de Modena, a disciple of Rabbi Yosef Colon, mentions that 600,000 Jews left Spain. The Spanish historian Juan de Mariana says that 800,000 Jews left Spain. Let's say 500,000, just an average, okay? Just the 500,000 Jews live in Spain. How many of them got to their destination? We don't know. Now, what was the favorite destination of the Jews that left Spain?
Portugal?
Yes. Portugal and Turkey. Why? Turkey, because the Turkish Sultan would welcome the Jews with their open hands. The Turkish Sultan said, and I thought that Fernando was an intelligent king. Now we know that he left the Jews and allow us to bring their riches, because the Jews created wealth. Okay. Now the problem with Turkey, although it was ideal, was how you get there. I just explained to you the dangers of going to a boat. Besides that, you are exposed to the weather and to storms and to so many difficulties in the sea, to pirates. So it's very dangerous. One of the rabbis I mentioned here, Rabbi Ishak Karo, the uncle of Rabbi Yosef Karo, he reached Turkey and he lost in the journey his wife and all his sons. Okay, in the journey. Now, Portugal was the preferred destination because it was, you didn't have to go by sea. You could go just walk there, all right? So 120,000 Jews left Spain and came to Portugal. Not free, they had to pay to be accepted in Portugal. And what happened when they got there? After, they had to pay, let's say, 1 gold coin per person to be there for a year. Now, they were hoping that during that year, they were promised by the king of Portugal that he will allow them to go and to take a ship and to go to Turkey or to Italy or whatever they wanted. But there were no ships, there were no boats. There were no boats. And in 1493, João, the king of Portugal, said, either you pay me for another year or you are my slaves. You are my slaves. All right? And people didn't have the money. So what did he do? He says, well, now you are my slaves. So I can take your children are mine. And thousands of children were taken to convents. There was a boat organized by João, by this terrible king, that this boat went to an island which was called La Isla de los Lagartos, the island of crocodiles. This island was in St. Thomas, not St. Thomas here, St. Thomas in Africa, off the western coast of Africa, a very, very bad place that was an island colonized recently by the Portuguese explorers, used as a criminal colony. 750 children, Jewish children, were taken to that island. And the rabbi I'm talking about right now is Rabbi Abraham Sava. Apparently, 2 of his children were taken either to convents or taken to this island. The fact is that Rabbi Abraham Sava lost his children. And can you imagine the desperation? And he stayed in Portugal to look for his children. And you might have heard this story, what I'm going to tell you right now, in a different historical framework. And it could be that both of them are true. But this is what Rabbi Abraham Sava tells us. He disguised himself as a Christian peasant. And he went convent by convent to look for his children. And in every convent he will get, he will say out loud, Shema Israel, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, and start saying, Ve'ahavta. And the Jewish children will come when they hear that and start crying, remembering their parents. This was one of the most tragic things. Look what he writes. Rabbi Abraham Sava writes, "This is the great tragedy that befell us in Portugal, that the king took the young boys and girls and sent them away in ships to the reptile island to populate that place. They had no mercy." This is something they did in Portugal. They didn't even do that in Spain. All right? Rabbi Abraham Sava was looking for his children. He had books that he wrote, but it was forbidden to have Jewish books. At one point, he was trying to hide his tefillin, and he was discovered, and he was sent to jail, and he almost died in that jail. But he witnessed something in that jail that if it wouldn't be for him, we wouldn't know about this. And I think I'm going to tell you exactly what it is, because it's something that happened to a rabbi with a name that is very familiar in this community. So Rabbi Abraham Sava, in jail, he witnessed the terrible fate of the last chief rabbi of Portugal. The last chief rabbi of Portugal was called Rabbi Shimon Maimi. Maimi. The rabbi, his wife, and his sons-in-law were tortured by the local church officers in the hopes that they would convert to Catholicism and become role models for the rest of the Jews, as happened in Spain. You know, in Spain there was the chief rabbi named Abraham Senior, and at the end he decided to convert to Catholicism, and many Jews unfortunately follow, okay, his way. Some people say Lamed Zechut Alav. Some people say that he converted so he could buy. He would be able to buy from the Jews that were living some of their properties, because you would sell your estate for a donkey or for one coin, for nothing. So some people say that he converted specifically to benefit all the Jewish community. We don't know. In any case, the heroic Rabbi Maimi, his wife, and their family endured the terrible tortures, and they died al Kiddush Hashem, resisting conversion. So the life of Rabbi Abraham Sava and many other rabbis, Rabbi Yehuda Hayat, that I also wrote about him, such a difficult life. And you have to see that even though they struggle so much, they suffer so much, they never stop writing, debating, studying, leading their communities. They got such an incredible energy to help others. Another rabbi I want to talk to you about. The third one, right? Rabbi Tam ibn Yahya. I'm sure nobody heard about this rabbi. I have the impression that this is going to be the first time since his death that somebody is going to talk about him. Rabbi Tam ben Yehia, he was born in Lisbon, Portugal. His father was the chief rabbi of Portugal before Rabbi Meini. But he was accused by the Portuguese Inquisition of helping conversos. You understand what I'm saying? There were some conversos, people who converted by force. And now, this rabbi, Rabbi Yehia, he was helping them, you know, giving them some kashrut, etc. Something, because they were keeping Judaism as much as they could. They were able to, in secret. And for that he was condemned. He was condemned to die, you know, burned, to be burned alive in the autos de fe. He fled Portugal, he escaped Portugal. He couldn't take one penny. He came from a very wealthy family. So he went to Turkey, Constantinople, and this is where his son, Rabbi Tam ibn Yehia, was raised. He was a genius. Was a real genius. Besides being one of the greatest of that generation, we talk about generation of Rabbi Yosef Karo. You need to imagine the caliber of these rabbis. Besides being one of the greatest Talmidei Chachamim in Torah, he was also a very, very famous physician. I think that at least 1/3 of the rabbis I mentioned here were also physicians, which was a very noble profession that Sephardic rabbis used to have, especially in Spain. Now, he was such a famous physician that he became the physician of the Turkish Sultan. He was very close to the government, which was very important. Not only that, he was also a great expert in Turkish language, in Arabic language, and guess what? Hold your chairs. In Sharia law. In Islamic Muslim law. So look what his son, Gedaliah ben Tam, writes about him. My father's knowledge of Islamic law was so great that Muslim judges, imams, often consulted with him regarding their decisions. You see the kind of a genius he was. Now, in those days, to be the chief rabbi of Turkey meant to be the chief rabbi of the Ottoman Empire, which included, among other things, Lebanon, Egypt, Syria, Eretz Israel. So he was the chief rabbi of all that place. And that had two consequences. One, that he was consulted every single day internationally to make some decisions. So probably there is an estimation that he wrote around 10,000 teshuvot. He was a very prolific writer. 10,000 teshuvot, 10,000 responses. All right? Now there is something very important also of being a chief rabbi of the Ottoman Empire. That whenever there is a problem in Lebanon, in Syria, in Egypt, in Israel, you solve it with the Sultan. And to have a connection with the Sultan so close meant many times for Jewish communities or Jewish individuals the difference between life and death. So he was there to help the Jewish community in the Ottoman Empire. Now there is something tragic about this rabbi. He was probably like a Maimonides of his generation, the way he described it. But something happened, something tragic happened. That in 1541, there was a terrible fire in the city of Constantinople, Istanbul. The fire claimed many lives, and it also consumed all the books that have been written by Rabbi Tam ibn Yahya, which he had never had the opportunity to publish them. He was waiting, accumulating these books and these thousands of teshuvot to be written, and everything was destroyed. Such was the pain Rabbi Tam suffered, seeing his life work consumed by fire, that, according to his students' testimony, his death in 1542 was partly due to the sadness and grief he suffered from the loss of his manuscripts. So, but again, I feel that when we talk about these rabbis, we have to say, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu melech haolam, mechayeh hametim. That Baruch Hashem is giving us the opportunity to resurrect their memories and to really expose the greatness of these giants, these forgotten giants. Well, I can talk more and more. I can talk to you about those rabbis who made it from the lowest point to the highest point. From the lowest point of the expulsion from Spain to the highest point. What is the highest point? To reach where? Eretz Israel. It wasn't as pleasant, as comfortable as Turkey, but this is Eretz Israel. And these rabbis expelled from Spain, Rabbi Yaakov Berav, Rabbi Levi ibn Habib, Rabbi Yosef Karo, the three of them born in Spain. Okay? They went to Eretz Israel. Rabbi Levi ibn Habib, he recreated the life of the Jewish communities in Jerusalem. Rabbi Yaakov Berav, he recreated the Jewish settlement in Sefat, which was in those days bigger than Jerusalem. Not only that, he said, well, we are now in Eretz Israel. We can do now something amazing. We can renew the semicha. The semicha is the original rabbinical ordination, not the one that we rabbis have today, which is something, artificial. But the real one. What is the quality or the advantage of having that semicha? That if you have that semicha, you can be part of a Sanhedrin that could rule not only for your local community, but for all of Israel. You understand what I'm saying? Every rabbi has authority within his community. But if you have that original semicha, you have the authority to rule over all of Israel, which is something that finished with the Mishnah and a little bit of the Talmud. That's why we are all born to the Mishnah and the Gemara. But after that, every rabbi has only local authority. So with the renewal of the Semicha, there was an opportunity to say, okay, now we are a little bit back in Eretz Israel. Let's have one halacha, because, as Rabbi Yosef Karo explained, Ne'esta Torah kikama Torot. Everybody had his own minhagim and differences and machloket and this and that. Let's make just one halacha. Isn't that a great idea? One halacha for Sephardim, Ashkenazim, for everyone. That was the program of Rabbi Yaakov Berav. Now, for different reasons, he didn't reach that goal. He had some musmachim. He didn't reach that goal, among other things, because the Turkish government said, wait a second. Having a Sanhedrin means that they will be independent from us? Oh, we don't like that. And they chased after Rabbi Yaakov Berav. And Rabbi Yaakov Berav was in danger. His life was in danger. He had to flee. All right? Now, what we got from there, with the same thought, is we got the Shulchan Aruch, which is the book that was written for Olam Israel. Supposedly, is the book that is good for Sephardim, Ashkenazim, for everyone. Is the unified code of Jewish law. Rabbi Yosef Karo was a student of Rabbi Yaakov Berav. So you see how these rabbis, from misery, they went into greatness and things that are so good that we enjoy them even today. All right, so I would like to leave some time for questions if you have. I have more to say, but you know, everything is here in the book. Yes, sir.
Did they, at these times, close all the synagogues overnight? Like, did this happen overnight, or was this over a period of years, or like how did all this happen with the rabbis, that expulsion and all that? Like all the synagogues, all of a sudden, nobody went to synagogue anymore?
You mean in Spain or outside of Spain? In Spain. In Spain it was a very slow process. But slowly, I was reading today about a city, Maqueda, in Spain. There were 280 Jewish families. But slowly, they couldn't resist. They assimilated, they converted. And many synagogues were turned into churches, or were destroyed. But as I said, most Jews, they were strong and they were willing to give everything, all their possessions, everything, and endanger their lives and the life of their children, al Kiddush Hashem, to maintain the Torah. And many of the Jews, as you know, they converted just, you know, how you say, exteriorly? Mm-hmm. The exterior. Externally. But they were trying to keep everything they could. You know, there is a connection between the Jews from Spain and the Jews from Amsterdam that I mentioned at the beginning of this lecture. Incredibly, thousands of Jewish families, they kept the Judaism for 3 and 4 generations underground. They were living externally as Christians and internally as Jews for 3 or 4 generations. This is how in 1596 they were able to go to Amsterdam and to other places. Amsterdam was an exception because it was the first time that was declared freedom of cult, 1596. So you could go there and just live as a Jew freely. Something unprecedented. Okay? Yes?
Is it true that due to lack of access to the printing press, that many Sephardic countries, they couldn't publish as much as the Ashkenazim were able to publish, or something that I've heard about all the time?
Listen, many of these books, they were published in Venezia, afterwards in Livorno, some of them in other places, in Turkey, but they were never republished. So they are almost lost. As I said, today we have Hebrew books. But I give you one example of one of the rabbis I wrote about. His name was Rabbi Moshe Almoznino. Okay? How many of you have heard about him? Okay? Now, I never heard about him. I was never taught anything about him. Now, I happened to read his commentary on Megillat Esther. I'm a rabbi many years, and every year before Purim, I read some new books on Megillat Esther. I never found any book that gets to 10% of the depth and the incredible insight that this book has. Rabbi Moshe Almoznino analyzes the language of Megillat Esther, the character of Ahashverosh, like a psychoanalyst, like a psychologist. Unbelievable! With such an incredible respect for language and for the Midrashim. And he gets so many chidushim out of this approach, which is a very classic Sephardic approach, language. All right? Now, this book is unreal. Again, in person, I never read anything close to it. Now, it was published probably in the 16th, 17th century in Venezia. Never publish again. Now here you have a project. You know, this book is called Yedei Moshe. Okay, Yedei Moshe. It's about the 5 Megillot, but I think that it's like 600 pages. Okay, but I think that the most useful for today is Megillat Esther. His Perush of Megillat Esther is fantastic. So we need to revive this and bring this book to life again. You know, republish them or do something about it. Yes.
How come the Jews in Spain didn't go to Morocco, to go to North Africa? It's much closer than going to Turkey. Wasn't it easy for them to?
Some of them went to Morocco.
But how come not more?
Because the Muslims in Morocco and in North Africa didn't receive them that well, and those countries were very, very poor. So many of them, we have testimonies of Jews that went there, and you know what? They were in such misery that some of them decided to go back to Spain and even to convert because of the suffering in Morocco. There is an evidence, a testimony that in a drought in the city of Fez in Morocco, 20,000 Jews died in those days because of starvation. Okay, so it was very difficult. Eventually they would move there. Another thing, because this is unbelievable, because the Spaniards would go to Morocco and would go to Algiers and to Tunis chasing the Jews there. They were obsessed with the Jews. Unbelievable. Obsessed. Yes, sir.
The Jews that kept Judaism underground, was there like a network, like you knew that these people were keeping Judaism?
Yes,
like
yes.
People knew that which Jews were keeping, which Jews were really fake?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. Yeah, I gave a lecture, and with this I'm going to finish. I gave a lecture a few months ago about Doña Gracia Méndez. Doña Gracia Méndez Nasi, fascinating. And her husband was considered, outwardly, behaved like a Christian completely, but among the conversos, he was considered the rabbi of the conversos. You see, so yeah, and they would go, they would do the wedding in the church, and they would do then, in their house, a very small Jewish Chuppah Kiddushim. He would perform the Chuppah Kiddushim, the husband of Doña Gracia Méndez. Okay, the last one.
In your research, did you find writings that were, for you, surprisingly progressive or modern for the times they were written? Like people talking about the role of women in Judaism or...
No, not really. No. I found other things. For example, there is one book of Rabbi Moshe Hefetz, Melechet Machashevet, that he was also a scientist. So he had some insights, scientific insights that helped me to understand one of the biggest mysteries in the Torah and in Jewish education, which is what happened during the second day of the Beriah. What happened? What is the distinction between the upper waters and the lower waters? What happened? I say it was also a mystery in Jewish education because Morash Hoshana never addressed that. They never teach you what really happened the second day. So Rabbi Moshe Hefetz, like from the 17th century, he opened my mind. So in that sense, yes, there's a lot of information. In theology, there is a lot of information. These things belong to modernity. I don't think they never thought about that. Okay. All right. Yes. Yes, sir.
Yes, I was going to ask you, it sounds like you had two types of manuscripts that you found. One was the rabbis of the time writing responsa literature or writing their interpretation of the Talmud but that doesn't tell you about the lives that they lived, not all of that. So you must have had historical manuscripts, people who were writing in the 16th century about what happened 200 years before.
Yeah,
That's a whole different library
Right.
to find.
absolutely, yes.
How did you unearth that?
Right, well, it was challenging. It is challenging because, unfortunately, there are forgotten giants. Yeah, but most of the rabbis I wrote about, half of it, more or less, is bio, and the other half is about their works. And many times you have to read the works in order to refer to them. But as I said, it's very rewarding and fascinating. Thank you very, very much for your attention.